Hi everyone, my name is Leah Rachel, and I'll be talking to you a little bit today about recent developments regarding borderline personality disorder. Throughout this presentation, I will be referring to it by its abbreviation, BPD. So I'm operating under the assumption that most of us in this class are somewhat familiar with the characteristics of BPD, but just so we all have a good baseline, I want to go over some of these aforementioned characteristics. So BPD is characterized by a pattern of unstable interpersonal relationships and self-image, and also marked impulsivity. As indicated by 5 or more, frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment, patterns of unstable, intense interpersonal relationships, an unstable self-image, impulsivity, as stated before, in at least 2 different domains, so that can be sex, gambling, substance abuse, anything of that nature, recurrent suicidal ideation, gestures, behaviors, or threats, affective instability, and inappropriate intense anger, among others. The article I wanted to discuss with you today was researched and conducted by Sandra Baez and colleagues. It was published in 2015 in the Journal of Neuropsychology, which is funded by the British Psychological Society. It was based on the idea that impaired social cognition is an underlying mechanism for the development and maintenance of BPD. For those of you who do not know, social cognition is 1, the ability for us to get along well with others, and to also see things from their point of view, so similar to empathy. The researchers strove to examine the performance of BPD patients and compared to healthy controls on theory of mind, TOM, emotion recognition, and executive functioning. This is because previous TOM studies yielded inconsistent results, and these researchers wanted to find more conclusive, definitive results. Now, before we get into the methodology and the results of the actual study, I wanted to go over briefly what theory of mind is. I myself had no idea, and I just recently learned about executive functions. So theory of mind refers to the understanding that each individual person has their own unique mental state. So their wants, needs, feelings, desires, basically that everyone has their own unique feelings separate from another. The Baez et al. Article that I used also hints that theory of mind, TOM, is heavily influenced by executive functioning and emotion recognition. So executive functions are basically skills that we use to aid in accomplishing tasks. Some of these tasks can include managing time, simply paying attention, being able to switch focus from one thing to another, and also to multitask. So if you have impaired executive functioning, you'll probably have less controlled behavior. This also makes a lot of sense considering that executive functions are controlled by the frontal lobe, which helps with decision making and judgments. Emotional recognition is pretty self-explanatory. It's the ability to identify correctly human emotions, and this is mainly done through analyzing different facial expressions. The study itself had 30 total participants, so they were divided evenly in half between 15 BPD diagnosed clients and 15 controls, so 15 individuals who did not have a behavioral or psychiatric diagnosis. However, all 30 participants were given a battery of psychiatric and behavioral questionnaires. These included the Depression Inventory, the State Trait Anxiety Inventory, and the Barrett Impulsiveness Scale. These were also used to help test for executive functions. To help test for emotional recognition, clients were given a facial expression task, which featured 6 basic emotions. These included happiness, surprise, sadness, fear, anger, and disgust. In addition, for being tested for accuracy, all 30 participants were also tested for the time in which it took them to complete the task. To test for theory of mind, or TOM, clients were given a full PA test, or an FTP. This contained a small vignette that may or may not have a common social faux pas. At the end of the test, clients were instructed to tell the researchers if they thought someone had said or done something awkward. In addition to the faux pas test, clients, or participants, I should say, were also given a reading the mind and the eyes, or RMET test. So participants were shown 30 different expressions from 30 different sets of eyes, and participants were then instructed to identify 4 different thoughts or feelings that the eyes were expressing to them. As someone who's been studying and researching BPD for a couple of years, I found the results to be not so shocking. In terms of executive functioning, BPD participants performed worse overall compared to the controls. Their lowest scores were on motor inhibitory control and spatial working memory. So just think of motor inhibitory control as the voluntary control of movements. They had a lot of difficulty with that. Spatial working memory is just the retention and manipulation of visuospatial information in the environment. As for emotional recognition, oddly enough, there weren't any differences on the emotional morphing that was the basic facial expression task. However, post hoc findings did show that BPD participants had some difficulty with the disgust category. As for theory of mind, BPD participants showed both lower intentionality and also lower emotional attribution scores. This was in the faux pas test. The authors did not explicitly mention what this means, the lower intentionality and emotional attribution scores, but for me, I would imagine that they incorrectly identified the social faux pas or the awkward moments in the vignettes they were given. So you are probably wondering, after I just threw all these different terms at you, from executive functioning to theory of mind, probably wondering, what does this all mean? Well, the authors found that those with BPD are less accurate at emotion identification. However, as a whole, they are accurate in detecting emotion. Maybe not accurately, but they can detect when emotion is there. Additionally, BPD individuals often inaccurately identify the thoughts, feelings, and intentions of others, either as something else completely or not at all. They also found that executive functioning, so the ability to essentially get things done, can only accurately predict performance when that individual is faced with a more complex theory of mind issue, so a more socially complex issue if you think of the faux pas test that they were given. Ultimately, the authors found that emotional processing is only partially predictive of theory of mind in regards to executive functioning, and that there were some limitations in their study, and that this should be repeated to hopefully iron out some kinks and come up with more definitive and concrete conclusions to the relationship between borderline personality disorder, theory of mind, and executive functions. After all is said and done, even though the Baez and colleagues article was very enlightening and interesting, I was kind of disappointed to see that they didn't really talk about any neurological structures of the brain. So I did some additional research and came across an article put out by the National Institute of Mental Health back in 2008. And the authors discussed structural differences between BPD participants and controls. So they found that actually gray matter amounts vary in those of BPD and controls. So the amygdala showed exaggerated activity. The gray matter density actually increased while the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC, was actually underactive and had lower than normal gray level matter. The article further explained that the ACC would normally increase to help and aid balancing out the amygdala in times of fear. So the fear hub was actually underactivated. And while reading this, I was wondering what the implications would be, considering that not only are individuals with BPD more prone to fears of abandonment, whether that's real or imagined, but also that they engage in very risky behavior at times, which should be scary, such as self-harm, like cutting or burning, and also being prone to suicidal behaviors, thoughts, gestures, ideation. So I'm actually curious to do more research about this specific issue and see what those implications could mean for further research down the line. Also, my apologies, to the right, that is obviously a photo of the brain, and the areas in red, if I'm not mistaken, are the amygdala. And that is the article for you. If you have any questions, concerns, comments for me, I know you know to leave them in our Canvas discussion, and hopefully I can answer them for you and we can engage in a very enlightening and fruitful discussion. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you. Look forward to hearing from you.